Hello and welcome back to Hot Take here on No Bullshit, where we review the latest movies and give you our hot take on them. Today's topic is Marvel's latest entry in their cinematic universe, Captain Marvel. Before we get to that though, a few quick announcements about this series. We're officially entering year 2 for our Hot Take series. Yes, we reviewed over 30 movies last year and I had a lot of fun doing it with you guys. Now, I know this series isn't the most popular and it doesn't get the most clicks or likes, but I certainly have fun doing it and I hope some of you guys are at least enjoying some of these movies and their reviews. And it's fitting to come back with Captain Marvel this week because we started this whole Hot Take series all the way last year in February reviewing Black Panther, another Marvel movie. And well, I plan on keeping this thing going strong into the next year as well too. So if you guys are having as much fun as I am, make sure you hit that like button to keep this Hot Take series going. I'm hoping and praying to get at least 2,000 likes on my Hot Take videos so that they're worth my time and effort, and hopefully you guys enjoy them once in a while too. And if you're new and you haven't seen one of these, basically Hot Take is my hot take of a movie. I review it real quick the day after. It's my first impressions and I'll admit they're usually pretty positive. I don't get too critical in the hot takes, not too much unless the movie's really bad. No, overall hot takes are my good, favorable first impressions, and then later on we could follow that up with some more critical looks in other videos. I have other more critical series like, for example, SJW moments in movies, where we talk about the social justice warrior and liberal politics that are infused in our films. And don't worry, Captain Marvel will probably get one of those too, but first, let's get to the hot take. All in all, first things first, I have to admit, Captain Marvel is certainly not as bad as most people think it'll be. It was a pretty fun movie and a worthy addition to the Marvel franchise. Now, it's certainly not the best movie in their series, but it's not the worst either. It's a good, fun movie. There's some problems with it, but there's also some really cool stuff in there too, so giving it a watch is definitely worth your time, especially if you're interested. Now, I admittedly wasn't a big fan of the character before. I hardly even knew about Captain Marvel, but once the movie came out, then the hype started coming. And yeah, it was overhyped, but in the end, it wasn't a terrible movie either. The feminism wasn't too strong, there wasn't too much politics or anything. I mean, it's what you expect from a Marvel movie, but what you expect from like a middle ground, not the best one, but not the worst either. I would say it definitely compares well to Black Panther again. We mentioned that earlier. That was the Marvel movie that came out at the beginning of last year, and Captain Marvel has some similarities. It's a new character, a new world in a lot of ways, and also, it's one of those movies that was overhyped, and you want to go and watch it and say, oh, it was really shitty, but it's actually not that shitty either. It's just kind of in the middle. Like I said, it may be like a B-level movie, but everyone's talking about it like it's A+ or a perfection. Those press and cast interviews and the stuff we talked about in other videos definitely set this thing up to fail, but I have to admit, it did pull it off okay. Another Marvel movie this one reminded me of is Guardians of the Galaxy, for a couple of reasons. First of all, this movie is in space, and there's a lot of space travel, there's multiple planets, and lots of different locations that aren't typical in Marvel movies. Most of them are located on Earth or in countries and based on real places. And then there's a few that go off into space, like with Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy. But back to Guardians, this reminds me of that a bit because yes, it goes into space, and then also similar to that, Captain Marvel was a character I didn't know much about beforehand. I didn't know much about Guardians beforehand, but you go see the movie, give it a chance, and it's actually worth your time. But I wouldn't say it's as good as Guardians at all. Guardians is an A or A+ movie. That one's almost perfect, but it is similar in the ideas of it, the premises of it, and the way it plays out in space. Other thing I found similar to Guardians was the soundtrack. Now, again, Guardians is worlds above it. Guardians is a great, awesome movie, and it also had a great, cool soundtrack, but Captain Marvel seemed like it was kind of imitating that, trying to go for that cool, lots of pop songs, but in this case, it was 90s music. Like Guardians has older music, 60s, 70s, old classic rock stuff, but Captain Marvel does 90s style, and that's because of part of the story. This movie is set in the 90s, and there's a lot of pop culture references to it too, so that's another thing worth noting. Lots of references in this movie, lots of stuff from the 90s, lots of things like you see stores from the 90s, like in the trailer, she lands in a Blockbuster. That's something that's that's barely even around in the world anymore. Cool stuff like that. It was fun, but at times it was a little much. It seemed kind of, it could have been cheap. Like at one point she wears this band shirt and you're just like, okay, whatever. You know, like there's a few songs in there, but I like the 90s too, so I might be biased, and I'll say it, like I like the music and the 90s choices were pretty cool. That brings us to the story summary for this movie. The story summary for Captain Marvel goes like this. Basically, Captain Marvel starts off being named Vers, and she's going around with this gang of alien soldier people. She starts off in like this group of soldiers led by Jude Law. Jude Law is one of the main characters in this movie, and he starts off training Captain Marvel, who's called Vers in the beginning, and he trains her and they become these soldiers, and they're called Kree. Kree is this kind of alien race, and in the beginning you see them as these heroes that are like saving the universe, kind of like policing the universe or something like that. Now, things change throughout the film, and I'm not going to spoil too much here, just a very brief story summary, but basically, she starts off running around with Jude Law, and one of their missions leads to her crash landing on Earth. And then here's where the plot starts to build. First, she runs into the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, Agent Coulson and Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson. And by the way, Samuel Jackson's in this movie a lot. He does a great job. Jude Law, I mentioned before, he was awesome. So overall, this cast is really strong, like a good cast, a good supporting cast, I would say. Brie Larson, on the other hand, she's kind of just serviceable. She doesn't ruin it for me. There are a few bad moments I didn't like about her, especially in the press tour, but in the movie, mostly, she's okay. I'd say at least 75% of the time, she's doing a pretty good job, but there are a few moments, like for example, there's this parts where she runs and she does this like little jog run, and it made me just think, oh my god, is she even trying? Like she kept jogging around the spaceship in the beginning, and I thought that was a little off, and it made me think, hey, I really miss my running man. You know, Tom Cruise needs to teach her some running. You know, she's supposed to be a pilot too, and Tom Cruise come out with another Top Gun movie. He should have taught this girl how to run. You know what I'm saying? Because Tom Cruise gets those arms going. But yeah, basically the story goes from there. She crash lands on Earth, she meets the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and bada bing, bada boom, she starts discovering stuff. A lot of stuff about her past, because it actually turns out she's from Earth, so we got to figure out why she ended up with Jude Law's crew, and all this other stuff happens, but that's the basic setup, and like I said, it's pretty well done. You know, it's got that space stuff going on, and then they land on Earth, but then the aliens come in, so it's very, very out there, like very space style. Reminded me of Star Wars a little bit too, and also Independence Day was kind of referenced in this movie because they're pilots as well. Will Smith was a pilot in that movie, and they were like flying around Grand Canyon things, and that really reminded me of a lot too. The other thing I didn't like about Brie Larson and her Captain Marvel character was I wasn't really into the costume. Now, I will admit at the end, there's one point where she changes the colors to the Captain Marvel colors, and that was a lot of fun. That looked really cool once she got those perfect colors on, but before that, and most of the time, even after the colors changed, like, I just felt like her costume was too bulky. Now, I'm not trying to be too much of a guy here, I'm not trying to be too sexist, I don't want to be called a sexist pig, because that's what they say when you don't like anything about Captain Marvel, but for me, I do wish Captain Marvel was a little sexier. I mean, I know Brie Larson's not ugly, but the way they put her in this bulky suit, it's got no curves, it's like really tight, like too military style, and in my opinion, I wish there was a way it could have just like fit her form a little better. That's all it needed. It was just like too bulky, and I mean, I don't think that's Brie Larson's fault. I think it's some kind of costuming director's choice, but I'm pretty sure that choice was intentional. Like, they didn't want her to be too sexy because they're thinking in this movie, you know, they got that feminism undertone, girl power stuff that wasn't really said straightforward in the script, but some stuff hinted about, and I will get to some SJW moments in another video, don't worry. Hit like if you want that SJW moments of Captain Marvel, but that'll come in a couple days. But for now, basically, I think they made her costume bulky because they didn't want her to be sexy, because they didn't want this first hero, feminist hero, to be too sexy and based on sex appeal. So with all that positive and good stuff out of the way, what were more of the bad parts? Well, like I said, some Brie Larson stuff was bad, her costume wasn't the best. I think there was a lot going on in the movie, like a little bit too much going on. They tried to reference everything, and I appreciate it because I like trying to pick out, oh, this song from the 90s, but then they're referencing stuff from Marvel and all that stuff's coming in, and it really felt like a prequel movie in some ways too, like kind of like the Star Wars prequels where they keep trying to reference stuff that happens later, and it kind of muddles down the movie that's happening at the moment. I definitely think Captain Marvel had some of that going on. You know, the lead was like kind of the weaker part. Captain Marvel was the weaker part of her own movie. Like, all the supporting cast was great. Sam Jackson, they had Phil Coulson from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. come back. You know, there's Jude Law, who I mentioned before. Annette Bening is in this movie as another character that Captain Marvel has learned from, and all these cool people. Ben Mendelsohn is in there. He's an alien in this movie, and he's an excellent actor. So the supporting cast definitely brought it up, but it also made you notice that Brie Larson might not have a lot of legs to run. And as I said, she was also a good runner. Still a good movie though. I'm not hating on it too bad. Definitely better than I thought, but not the best or the worst Marvel movie. I think you know what I mean. With all that said, let's go ahead and bring out the hot take meter. I would easily give Captain Marvel 2.5 flames out of 5. That's 2.5 stars right down the middle. Could have been better with a better lead actor, a better performance, a better costume, and it could have also been worse. It could have been terrible. It could have just more boring and less going on, like other Marvel movies that are more forgettable, ones that are not as praised. Like some people say Iron Man 2 wasn't that good looking back. I know Ant-Man vs. the Wasp was a little lackluster to me. So stuff like that. I don't know if it's that bad, but it's not that great either. So good movie, worth a watch, definitely if you're interested, but if not, and if you are super offended by all that Marvel attacking white men stuff, then you could just wait for it to come on DVD. It's not a showstopper, but I don't think a lot of people are going to want to do that because there is the whole part where it leads off into the next Avengers movie. So a lot of people are going to watch it just because they want to see what happens before Avengers. That's going to happen, but what are you going to do? We'll be back in a couple weeks to review another hot Hollywood movie. Make sure you hit that like button if you want more movie reviews, and we'll see y'all next time.